Late at night, behind polished seminar halls and glowing sashes, NXIVM hid a world few ever saw. A world built on obedience, secrets, and a man who claimed he could rewire the human mind. For years, Raniere operated in the shadows, protected by wealth, influence, and unwavering devotion. But when the cracks finally appeared, they revealed something far more engineered than a simple cult. From hidden branding rituals to offshore money trails, every layer uncovered a deeper question. And the closer investigators looked, the clearer it became. NXIVM wasn't just a story of manipulation, it was a blueprint of control. Chapter 1. The Charismatic Mastermind. It is a quiet evening in Albany, New York. A dim suburban living room glows under the soft hum of yellow lamps, where a small group of well-dressed women sit in a circle, speaking in hushed tones. They aren't discussing a celebrity or a spiritual leader, but a man they call Vanguard, a title spoken with almost ritual reverence. He is late, yet no one complains. They wait as if his presence bends time itself, each glance toward the door, revealing a nervous mixture of devotion and anticipation. Years earlier, before these women ever whispered his name, Raniere was just another smiling face promising self-improvement. In the early 2000s, he launched NXIVM, a program marketed as a cutting-edge psychological system for unlocking human potential. His tone was gentle, almost fragile. He spoke like a borrowed professor, carefully choosing words that sounded scientific even when they weren't. People didn't just listen. They leaned in, convinced they were hearing truths unavailable anywhere else. At first, his followers arrived out of curiosity, drawn in by friends and acquaintances. They entered modest conference rooms expecting a quick motivational seminar. Instead, they encountered Raniere's strange blend of neuroscience buzzwords, philosophy, and moral absolutism. He framed every frustration as a puzzle his program could solve. Participants left feeling seen, understood, uplifted, and he took note of who was most susceptible to that feeling. As the movement grew, so did Raniere's reputation. Recruits whispered about his off-the-charts IQ, his supposed brilliance in mathematics, his ability to solve complex problems in seconds. Newspapers repeated the claims without verification, further strengthening his legend. Hollywood actresses joined, then the daughters of billionaires, then ambitious professionals desperate for an edge, and quietly, Raniere's myth hardened into something approaching religious belief. But the most startling transformation wasn't in the public perception of NXIVM, it was in the women who surrounded him. Friends noticed how their personalities shifted. They spoke more softly, laughed less, deferred more readily to his opinions. These were confident, successful women. Yet Raniere convinced them that true strength came from surrendering their impulses and trusting him completely. This raises the first unsettling question. How did a soft-spoken, harmless-looking man persuade empowered women to relinquish their independence, their privacy, and eventually their bodies? Some described his talent as almost hypnotic. Others said he pierced straight through their defenses, finding insecurities they didn't know existed. There was something else too, something harder to quantify. Former insiders insisted Raniere possessed an uncanny ability to read people with surgical precision. He knew what they feared, what they desired, and what secret guilt kept them obedient. He called it a skill he had trained. Yet he never explained what that training involved or where he learned it. Certain members swore he could finish their sentences or predict their reactions before they formed. They claimed he understood them better than they understood themselves. Inside NXIVM, this wasn't seen as manipulation but mastery. To question it meant confessing one's own limitations. Outside that Albany living room, few would have guessed the depths of influence he exerted. Behind closed doors, admiration gradually shifted into dependence. Raniere encouraged endless self-critique while presenting himself as the only stable reference point. He pushed members to reveal vulnerabilities in the name of growth, collecting their confessions like currency. So when a woman hesitated, he reminded her that fear was merely the ego resisting evolution. When someone questioned his teachings, he reframed doubt as a personal failing, and each time they yielded, his authority grew stronger. What began as a self-help course soon became a hierarchy, with Raniere at its silent, immovable center. The women now waiting for him in that dim room weren't just followers, they were disciples conditioned to believe that transformation required obedience. And as the door finally creaked open and footsteps approached, none of them suspected how far he intended to push that obedience or how willingly they would obey. Chapter 2. The Secret. Within the Secret. NXIVM's public face was immaculate. Bright conference rooms, color-coded sashes, smiling coaches delivering lines about integrity and personal growth. Visitors walked in believing they had discovered a sophisticated leadership school, but beneath the glossy surface, there was a sealed chamber of secrecy, a place where no banners hung and no cameras were allowed. It began with whispered invitations. Not everyone heard them, only those considered disciplined, loyal, and psychologically moldable. They were pulled aside after classes, sometimes late at night, sometimes during quiet walks, told they were being offered access to a higher path, and the women selected believed it, because the request came wrapped in reverence. Raniere called it DOS, Dominus Obsequious Sororium. The Latin sounded ancient, authoritative, mysterious. Members were told it was a female empowerment society, a secret sorority designed to make them stronger, braver, more uncompromising in their goals. But nothing about the initiation felt empowering, not even in the beginning. To enter, each woman had to provide something called collateral. Nude photographs, confessions, letters admitting crimes they never committed, secrets about family members that could shatter lives. The demand was delivered gently, like a doctor giving a diagnosis. They were told fear was a sign of transformation. Resistance was framed as weakness. Still, the question lingered. Why did successful, intelligent women hand over material that could destroy them? Behind Raniere's soft voice lay a psychological formula he never fully explained, a method that resembled recruitment techniques used by intelligence agencies, incremental trust building, isolation disguised as intimacy, and a constant rewriting of the meaning of obedience. Inside DOS, language itself was carefully re-engineered. A woman wasn't being blackmailed, she was being held accountable. Relinquishing boundaries wasn't submission, it was transcending limitation. When doubts appeared, they were interpreted as the ego resisting growth. This distortion was subtle enough that members didn't notice when belief quietly slid into dependency. There was also someone else guiding the structure, someone whose presence was felt even when she wasn't in the room. Members whispered about a woman at the top, a leader who enforced the rules with near religious devotion. She recruited the most loyal women, speaking of sacrifice with a calm, eerie conviction that left no space for questions. Who she truly was remained unclear to many inside the organization. To some she appeared as a mentor, to others a gatekeeper, but to those closest to Raniere she was something else entirely, his enforcer, protector and shadow. Her loyalty seemed absolute, almost spiritual, as though she believed protecting him was a sacred duty. Her presence deepened the mystery. Why did she serve him so fanatically? What promise or threat bound her so tightly to his world? Members sensed she knew more about DOS than anyone else. She appeared at key moments, then disappeared, leaving behind rules that felt carved into stone. While NXIVM promoted freedom and self-mastery, DOS demanded total surrender. Women were told to count calories, answer messages instantly, and seek permission for basic decisions. These instructions were delivered not as commands, but as opportunities for growth, creating a dissonance that softened resistance. And at the center of it all, Raniere watched quietly from a distance, never appearing in DOS rituals, but shaping them completely. The secrecy tightened, the vows deepened, and the women, bound by collateral and devotion, believed they were ascending toward empowerment, never realizing they were descending into control. Chapter 3. Branding Night. It is well past midnight in a quiet townhouse in Clifton Park, when the women's phones vibrate simultaneously. A single message glows on each screen. Master needs you. No explanation, no context, just an instruction heavy enough to jolt them from sleep. They dress quickly, hearts rattling in their chests, knowing hesitation is considered weakness. They gather in a small upstairs room, where the blinds are always kept closed. Candles flicker along the edges of the carpet, their flames bending like nervous witnesses. The air smells faintly of antiseptic, but no one comments. They have been told this night marks a passage toward strength, commitment, and unbreakable unity. A woman with trembling hands directs them to disrobe and kneel. Her voice is steady, but her eyes flick upward as if silently asking forgiveness. She repeats the script they've memorized. Pain is symbolic, surrender is transformative, fear is the ego clinging to limitation. The words sound rehearsed, brittle, already cracking. Then the cauterizing pen appears, a thin surgical wand heated until the tip glows orange. Suddenly the room tilts into something ancient and sinister. One woman lies on the table as two others hold her limbs still. She tries to breathe deeply, but the knowledge of what comes next shatters the rhythm of her chest. As the pen touches skin, The scent of burning flesh mixes with the candle wax. The woman screams, then tries to muffle it, ashamed of her voice breaking the ritual's silence. The others watch with a mixture of horror and reverence, unsure whether they should look away or bear witness to prove their own dedication. They are told the mark symbolizes the strength of their bond, an emblem of female empowerment designed to remind them of their resilience. But the design itself is shown only briefly, traced quickly on paper before being flipped over. The explanation is vague, almost evasive, as though clarity would ruin its meaning. One woman, though, catches a glimpse when the paper briefly shifts under a candle flame. What she sees is not a symbol of abstract sisterhood, but the unmistakable intertwining of two letters, K and R, Raniere's initials disguised inside a geometric frame. The realization hits her like cold water. This isn't empowerment, it's ownership. What she cannot understand is why Raniere escalated to such a visible, dangerous mark. For years he had hidden behind layers of secrecy, shaping behavior quietly, almost invisibly. Branding crosses a line that risks exposure, rebellion, legal danger. Something must have driven him to stake such a literal claim over their bodies, something deeper than loyalty. And as the ritual continues, whispers circulate among the women, rumors of another initiation, one never discussed openly. Survivors would later hint at it, but rarely describe it, suggesting a ritual darker than the brand itself, so unsettling that even in courtrooms it hovered between implication and silence. The branding session moves from woman to woman, each one pinned down, each one biting back screams. The process is slow, deliberate, crafted to break not just the body but the boundary between self and submission. The room grows hotter, filled with fear disguised as devotion. Hours later, when the last candle flickers out, the women cradle their wounds with shaking hands. They are congratulated on their courage, told they have crossed into a higher realm of discipline. Yet beneath the praise lies a chilling truth only a few can sense. Something irreversible has begun. When they leave the townhouse, they step into the cool morning air with bandaged skin and forced smiles. The sun is rising, but none of them feel lighter. They carry the brand beneath their clothes, a secret scar of loyalty, power, and fear, and an unspoken question of how far the next ritual will go. Chapter 4. The sexual engine at the center. The truth about NXIVM's core did not sit in its training modules or its colored sashes. It lived in the private world Keith Raniere constructed behind locked doors and encrypted messages. A world where the language of empowerment dissolved into a system built to secure women for his use. On the surface, he appeared monk-like, soft-spoken, celibate, devoted entirely to the philosophy he preached. But beneath that facade lay a machinery designed to funnel women into his control, one summons at a time. Recruitment rarely looked like seduction. It looked like mentorship. Raniere targeted women who admired him, praising their intelligence, telling them they were special enough to join his inner evolution. He reshaped their vulnerabilities into pathways. Confessions gathered in coaching sessions became psychological leverage. Soon, admiration blurred into dependency, dependency into submission. Each step moved them closer to a place where refusal began to feel impossible. He maintained a rotating circle of partners, survivors estimated between 12 and 20 at any given time, with over 50 across the years. Their roles were not publicly acknowledged. They existed in shadows, instructed to hide their relationships with him from one another. Raniere insisted secrecy prevented jealousy-based limitation, but it also ensured no woman ever saw the full scale of his control. Isolation created compliance. Silence maintained his power. Sex rarely arrived as a request. It arrived as a summons. A handler would message at unpredictable hours, "He wants to see you." Women climbed out of bed, shaking with a mixture of fear and obligation. They spoke later of walking toward his townhouse like sleepwalkers, unable to imagine refusing. The collateral they had given, the nude photos, confessions, and damaging letters hung over every step. They believed their lives could collapse with one betrayal of obedience. Inside, Raniere treated the encounters like examinations. Survivors described him positioning women with deliberate precision, correcting them with a detached calmness. The sex itself felt mechanical, as if he were testing their compliance more than seeking intimacy. Gratitude was expected afterward. Praise was compulsory. They left feeling hollow, their minds split between revulsion and the belief that they had grown because he told them their discomfort was ego-dissolving. Starvation played a role too. Women were ordered to maintain dangerously low weights, some surviving on 500 to 800 calories a day. Raniere claimed thinness made them more ethically attractive. But the effect was simpler. Underfed, exhausted women resist less. Their cognitive defenses broke down. Their sense of choice faded. Hunger became another instrument in his system of domination. One detail chilled investigators: the age spread. Some women were in their 20s or 30s, others were barely out of adolescence. One was 15 when Raniere drew her into his orbit, calling her extraordinary, isolating her from peers, and conditioning her to accept a role no child could consent to. This pattern suggested not impulse, but method. Why he built such an elaborate apparatus remained a lingering question. Prosecutors believed he studied obedience the way others study science, experimenting on followers to refine techniques of submission. Every rule, every correction, every punishment seemed calibrated to erode personal boundaries. More unsettling were hints of others involved. Encrypted emails, foreign connections, and unidentified men in financial documents suggested a support structure shielding him. Were there benefactors who knew what he was doing, or even encouraged it? The sealed portions of the case left a silence that prosecutors refused to explain. Raniere once told a follower, "Your body serves your mind, and your mind serves your purpose." In NXIVM, the purpose was always him. Women surrendered their choices, believing they were evolving. They didn't see the truth until the system collapsed around him. Every ritual, every command, every secret had been engineered to feed a single engine: his hunger for control. And when the women finally walked away, they weren't just escaping a manipulator, they were stepping out of a machine built to consume them, piece by piece, until nothing remained that had not first passed through his hands. Chapter 5: The Billionaire Sisters. The money didn't arrive with fanfare. It slipped quietly into NXIVM's bloodstream, transforming the group from a quirky self-help program into something far more fortified. Behind this sudden surge stood two women with a name recognized in every corner of high society: Claire and Sarah Bronfman, heiresses to the Seagram liquor empire, and the unexpected guardians of Keith Raniere's vision. They first appeared at NXIVM events as curious attendees, sitting politely through workshops, taking notes like diligent students. But something about Raniere's soft cadence, his quiet confidence, and his promise of unlocking hidden greatness hooked deeper than surface fascination. Soon, they weren't just participants, they were believers, and believers with a limitless checkbook. What began as financial support for human potential courses quickly expanded into something more strategic. The Bronfmans funded new NXIVM centers, legal offensives against defectors, and consulting teams that claimed to bring scientific legitimacy to Raniere's teachings. Money flowed freely, without hesitation, as if the sisters believed they were financing the future of humanity itself. Claire especially became the engine beneath NXIVM's most aggressive operations. She financed private investigators to track critics, hired digital forensics teams to recover deleted emails, and poured millions into lawsuits designed not to win but to exhaust and terrify. She pursued targets with a zeal that startled even seasoned insiders, as though defending Raniere had become a matter of personal salvation. It raised a question, whispered by investigators. Why did Claire act with such escalating intensity, even surpassing Raniere's earliest loyalists in her willingness to destroy lives for him? Some believed she saw him as the only person who truly understood her. Others suspected a deeper psychological grip, one he cultivated with precise and methodical care. Sarah, though less aggressive, followed the same gravitational pull. She financed philanthropic projects tied to NXIVM, creating a polished public image that masked the turbulence inside. The sisters became the cult's armor, soft-spoken in public, relentless in private, and always at Raniere's side when trouble approached. But the scale of their involvement shifted when financial investigators began peeling back the layers. They discovered traces of offshore trusts routed through island jurisdictions, servers encrypted beyond standard corporate protocols, and NXIVM affiliates making frequent unexplained international trips. Each thread revealed a part of a larger tapestry that didn't align with a simple self-help mission. The deeper investigators dug, the stranger the financial patterns became. Large transfers moved through shell companies with unclear ownership. Digital logs showed efforts to track former members using specialized software. Records hinted at operations resembling intelligence work rather than personal development coaching, raising suspicions about NXIVM's true function beneath the surface. With the Bronfman fortune behind him, Raniere didn't just expand, he fortified. Lawsuits became weapons, data gathering evolved into surveillance, and influence extended into political circles, especially in Mexico, where the group forged relationships with powerful families. Money shielded him, insulated him, emboldened him. Those within NXIVM saw Claire as the enforcer of this new, sharper phase. She attended meetings with an almost ascetic severity, her devotion to Raniere absolute. Members sensed she would do anything to protect him, as though her identity had fused with his mission. It was a loyalty without limit, and one that frightened even those still inside. Meanwhile, Sarah travelled internationally, representing NXIVM as though it were a legitimate humanitarian organization. Behind her polite demeanor, however, was a network of connections that investigators later struggled to untangle. Bridges built with money, influence, and unwavering conviction. As the sisters sank deeper into Raniere's world, NXIVM transformed from a sleek leadership program into an invisible empire upheld by wealth and fear. The lines between devotion, manipulation, and complicity blurred until no one could distinguish where one ended and the other began. And for years, as lawsuits multiplied and secrets deepened, the Bronfman money kept the machine running, quiet, well-oiled, and powerful enough that almost no one dared ask what NXIVM truly was becoming. Chapter 6. The Fall, the Flight, and the Fractures Still Unresolved. The collapse of NXIVM began quietly, not with a dramatic confession, but with a handful of women slipping out of the organization and gathering evidence like fugitives. They recorded conversations in parked cars, photographed documents hidden in binders, and whispered their stories to journalists who understood the danger of listening. Every testimony was a piece of a larger machine breaking from the inside. As the stories spread, NXIVM's structure shuddered. Members who once repeated Raniere's teachings with certainty now whispered doubts. Lawsuits were suddenly withdrawn. Coaches stopped returning messages. The empire built on psychological domination began to unravel, though Raniere refused to acknowledge it. Instead, he vanished. One day he was leading leadership intensives. The next he had slipped across the border into Mexico. He did not hide in anonymity. He stayed in luxury villas, protected by families with deep political roots, connections strong enough to make investigators wonder how he had built such influence. He moved between private compounds and gated communities with the ease of someone certain the law could not reach him. His followers travelled to him at his command, believing they were part of a mission far greater than the accusations at home. But while he plotted from abroad, whistleblowers and federal agents pieced together years of secrecy, destroyed hard drives, encrypted emails, financial trails that curved into offshore accounts and dissolved. The more investigators uncovered, the more NXIVM looked less like a cult and more like a network whose true scale remained obscured. In early 2018, agents tracked him to a villa near Monterey. By the time they moved in, he had already slipped out the back door, fleeing with a frantic urgency that revealed his first visible crack of fear. He fled to a resort in Puerto Vallarta, imagining it a safe harbor. But the FBI was already there, moving quietly through the grounds until they reached the room where he had been hiding. The arrest was brief. Raniere did not resist. His disciples watched silently as he was escorted out, handcuffed, expression unchanged. They believed he would emerge victorious, that the trial would reveal a conspiracy against him. But for the first time in decades, the narrative was no longer his to control. In New York, the courtroom felt sterile, almost clinical, as former members described the world he built. They spoke of coercion disguised as discipline, of collateral used as leverage, of diets imposed to break their strength, of midnight commands that eliminated their sleep and their autonomy. Some described being pulled into his inner circle, others described the fear of refusing him. Each testimony revealed another layer of his design. The jury convicted him on every major count. The fallout among his followers was immediate. Some fled, some turned on each other. A few remained steadfast, insisting the system had framed him. But even they could not explain the secrets uncovered in seized documents or the encrypted files that investigators still could not decode. Yet even with the verdict, law enforcement admitted gaps remained. Certain names and financial records were sealed. Some offshore accounts had no identifiable owners. There were hints of benefactors powerful enough that prosecutors hesitated to reveal them. Raniere once told a follower, "If I fall, another will rise." Whether it was delusion or warning remained unclear. As he was led into a life sentence, the question lingered like static in the aftermath. Had the entire machine been dismantled, or had investigators only clipped the visible head of something still breathing beneath the surface?